Could a bear start World War III? I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a joke, right? But the answer is, well, it's disturbingly close to yes. And the story of how it almost happened tells us something really important about how fragile our world actually is.
So picture this, it's the middle of the night, right at the absolute peak of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Tensions couldn't be higher. A guard at a US airbase, he's a figure climbing a fence. He's thinking, Soviet saboteur. So he does what he's trained to do. He opens fire and slams the sabotage alarm. But here's where it all goes wrong. A simple wiring mistake at a different base meant that alarm didn't signal sabotage. It triggered the nuclear scramble alarm. The pilots, who had been told there would be no drills, thought, this is it, World War III has begun. They sprinted to their jets, which were already armed with nuclear weapons. As they're literally taxiing to the runway, an officer realizes the insane mistake that's just been made. He jumps in a car, speeds onto the tarmac, and desperately signals for them to stop. He got there just in the nick of time. And the intruder that nearly ended the world? It was a black bear. Yep, one bear, one messed up wire, and we were seconds away from Armageddon.
That whole disaster in the making wasn't a one-off thing. History is absolutely full of these moments. In this explainer, we're going to dive into these patterns of human error. You know, the small accidents, the dumb insults, the massive miscalculations that have completely and often tragically shaped the world we live in. So, let's start with what I call the accidental triggers. These are the small, seemingly random moments that had the biggest consequences imaginable. Times where the entire course of history pivoted on something as simple as a wrong turn.
You know, the assassination that kicked off World War I was not some brilliant, masterfully executed plan. Not even close. In fact, the first attempt on Archduke Franz Ferdinand's life that morning was a total bust. A bomb literally bounced right off his car. So his driver was supposed to take a new, safer route. Key phrase, supposed to. Nobody told him. So he takes a wrong turn, pulling right onto a side street where, by pure chance, one of the assassins, Gavrilo Princip, was grabbing a sandwich.
And if that wasn't enough, the driver then stalls the car, trying to back up. Princip just can't believe his luck. He walks up and fires the shots that change the world. Think about that for a second. A single wrong turn starts this massive domino effect of military alliances, dragging the entire globe into a war that killed over 20 million people.
But, you know, mistakes aren't always physical things. Sometimes the trigger is just a word. A really foolish insult, or a few poorly chosen phrases can be just as destructive as a whole army.
Okay, back in the early 1200s, Genghis Khan sends a trade caravan into the neighboring Khwarezmian Empire. A local governor decides to have the merchants killed and just steals all their stuff. Now, instead of immediately declaring war, Khan sends diplomats to the Shah, basically just asking for justice. The Shah's response was, well, it was a catastrophic mistake. He had one of the envoys killed and sent his head back to Genghis Khan.
Now, in Mongol culture, you just do not harm a messenger. That was the ultimate insult, a clear declaration of war. Here's the thing, the Mongols were pretty busy fighting in China at the time and might have just let the whole thing slide. But this insult, it triggered a full-scale invasion that completely wiped the Khwarezmian Empire off the face of the earth, killed millions, and launched a wave of destruction that went all the way to Europe.
Let's jump forward about 700 years. It's November 9th, 1989. And this East German spokesman, Günter Schabowski, is at a press conference. He gets handed a note about new, relaxed travel rules, but he hasn't actually read it or been briefed on it. So when a reporter asks when the new rules take effect, Schabowski is just confused. He's shuffling through his papers, can't find a date, and he just improvises.
He says one word, immediately. Well, East Berliners hear this on TV and just flood to the Berlin Wall by the thousands. The guards are totally bewildered. They have no new orders. Completely overwhelmed by the massive crowds, they just open the gates. And just like that, the Berlin Wall, a 28-year symbol of division, came down. Not because of a grand strategy, but because one guy kind of mumbled the wrong thing at a press conference.
All right, our next bucket of historical oopsies is all about getting the fundamental assumptions completely wrong. These are the moments when bad math and some seriously flawed logic led to world-changing discoveries and, sometimes, devastating military failures. Let's talk about Christopher Columbus. By his time, pretty much every educated person knew the Earth was round. They even had a pretty good estimate of its size. But Columbus, he just decided to reject all that. He convinced himself the Earth was way, way smaller than it actually is.
And that is the key. That fundamental miscalculation is the only reason his voyage seemed possible in the first place. If he had used the correct numbers, the journey to Asia would have looked impossibly long and he probably never would have gotten the funding. His discovery of the Americas was only possible because his math was terrible and a whole continent just happened to get in his way.
Another giant miscalculation was France's Maginot Line. After the horrors of World War I, France built this incredible, state-of-the-art defensive line on its border with Germany. I mean, this thing was a technological marvel. Underground bunkers, heavy artillery, seemingly impossible to break through. The whole idea was to force Germany into another slow, bloody war of attrition. But there was one tiny, fatal flaw. The French military just kind of assumed that the dense Ardennes forest was impassable for tanks and a modern army, so they left that whole section of the border pretty much undefended. And in 1940, what did the German army do? They didn't even bother attacking the line. They just drove their tanks right through the forest, completely bypassed France's billion-dollar defense, and conquered the country in a matter of weeks.
And for our final section, we have the mistakes that are born from pure arrogance. The failure to plan for what comes next, the failure to see the consequences of your own success. This kind of thinking leads to preventable disasters and the total collapse of empires.
Alexander the Great. I mean, the guy conquered most of the known world by the time he was 32. An absolute military genius. But he failed at one absolutely critical thing: planning. When he died suddenly, he left behind this massive, world-spanning empire with no plan, no heir, and no clear instructions on who should take over.
The result was immediate, bloody chaos. His top generals, men who had fought alongside him for years, turned on each other in a brutal 50-year civil war. His unified empire was completely shattered into a bunch of warring kingdoms, and his dream of a connected, Hellenistic world pretty much died right there with him.
For a more modern example of this failure to think ahead, look at Mao Zedong's Four Pest campaign. The goal was to boost farm harvests, so he declared war on rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows, which he incorrectly blamed for eating too much grain.
Millions of people were mobilized to kill sparrows, and they were shockingly successful. They nearly wiped them out, but it was a catastrophic failure to understand a basic ecosystem. See, without sparrows to eat them, the locust population absolutely exploded. They swarmed across the country, devouring crops on a scale that is just hard to imagine. This was a major contributor to the Great Chinese Famine, a disaster that killed tens of millions of people.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? From a bear climbing a fence, to a driver making a wrong turn, to a simple insult. It shows us that history isn't some grand, predictable story. It's actually a really fragile, chaotic process, and it can be thrown completely off course by the simplest of human mistakes.
And that leaves us with a final, kind of unsettling question to chew on. When you look at the world today, our technology, our politics, our environment, what are the small, seemingly insignificant mistakes being made right now that future generations will look back on as the blunders that forged their history?